This program is made possible by the support of Delta Dental, Quick Trip, Marshfield Clinic Health System, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Hospital Association. Watch WisconsinEye on Spectrum Channels 995 and 363 and at wiseye.org.
Good morning, it's Senator Fitzgerald. I think with the way we're operating this morning, obviously the onus is on the press corps to mute their own phones unless they're actually asking a question. So I think that should work out well. So thanks everybody for joining us. The speaker and I thought it would be a good idea. We had a very positive response to our availability last week, and we thought it'd be a good idea to just try and not only field questions today, but just kind of once again tell everybody, all Wisconsinites, kind of where we think we're at as a legislature, and hopefully what we're going to be able to deal with in obviously dealing with the coronavirus. So I'll let the speaker kind of give some opening comments, and then we'll move towards trying to take some questions. So, Speaker Vos.
Thank you, Senator Fitzgerald. First of all, to all the people in Wisconsin who are dealing with this, thank you for your patience. I know that as we go through this entire process, it's challenging for people to understand exactly what's happening, and that's why hopefully what we're going to be able to...
hey, press corps, we need the press corps to mute their phones. Please mute your phones and stop talking aloud.
And then we'll move towards trying to take some questions. So, Speaker Vos. Thank you, Senator Fitzgerald. First of all, to all the people in Wisconsin who are dealing with this, thank you for your patience. I know that as we go through the entire process, it's challenging for people to understand exactly what's happening. That's why
Guys, we're going to switch the way we're doing this. So when your name is called, you'll need to press *6 to unmute. That's *6 to unmute. We're getting some feedback on the phones because some phones aren't being muted. So *6 when your name's called on, and that should unmute you.
So we'll just start again. So I want to thank the people of Wisconsin for your patience. I know that as we go through this entire crisis from beginning to end, there's a lot of challenges out there. There are people who have lost income. There are people who fear about the future of their business and their family. And that's why we want to make sure that we have an opportunity. We want to make sure we have an opportunity to answer the questions of the public and also talk about some of the things that we have learned. I've spent most of the past week calling back people not just in my district but all across Wisconsin and listening to the problems that they are having. Everything from still understanding the definitions of essential businesses to making sure people can get access to unemployment benefits and then answering questions about what's going to happen with the election. So we're happy to answer those questions today, but most importantly, I just wanted to express my thanks on behalf of every single Republican who represents you in the legislature and frankly on behalf of the Democrats too. We appreciate that the people of Wisconsin know that there's going to be an end to this and that we've got to all fight together and that hopefully this question of where we're going to go and where we're going to end up will be answered more quickly than not. So thanks again for being here, and I'll turn it back to Senator Fitzgerald.
So, I just want to express that the Republican State Senate Caucus has been convening pretty much every other day just to run through a number of issues. A lot of times just bringing the senators into the loop on updates that we're receiving from the executive branch, and then also kind of just filtering through questions that are emerging from the district. A lot of them are obviously items that we have been dealing with now for about 3 weeks, but there are some nuances and some changes to them as things develop, and we will continue to do that. So with that, I think we will try and take a few questions. So Victor Jacobo from CBS 58. Victor,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Victor, go ahead.
Thank you again for taking the call. I guess just wanted to see if there's any update on possible timeline for the virtual sessions, what those discussions are looking like with caucus members going.
We've actually had good discussions. I had a long conversation last night with the Minority Leader, Gordon Hintz. So our goal is to try to see if we're able to put together a package that takes some of the ideas that Governor Evers proposed in his legislation. As you know, we're still waiting to get the analysis back from the Fiscal Bureau as to all the different pieces that are in the CARES Act, because it doesn't only provide aid to state government, it also provides aids to transit systems, it provides aids to the university system, Veterans Affairs, so there's a lot of pieces to it. So certainly we want to know everything that's in the federal bill before we decide if we're going to spend precious state resources. So I do want to commend the minority for working with us. Our hope is to get a bill that everyone can vote for, that doesn't have things that would raise serious objections, and the goal would be to try to have that as soon as we can. But I don't want to put an artificial timeline on it because we want to make sure we get it right. But we do appreciate that speed is of the essence, so that's why we are in daily conversations to try to find that common sense middle ground to be able to get it done and be able to get it to Governor Evers.
Yeah, in the Senate, we're working with the technology that is available to us. LTSB has been putting in many, many hours to try and fine-tune the system that Senator Roth, the President of the Senate, has been kind of leading the charge on. I know he's been discussing this with the Minority Leader, Senator Schilling, and we have that test run tomorrow. It'll be very interesting to see if all the bugs have been worked out. I've been told that we're in a really good position, and we hope that that'll be the solution to trying to bring the state Senate in a safe way and make sure that both senators and staff are still able to make sure that the social distancing is something that we're adhering to. So, Kent Wainscott from WISN. Kent?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Yep.
Hey, great. Thank you for doing this. Just a quick question about Election Day. Are you comfortable in assuring voters that they'll be safe if they go to a polling place on Tuesday?
So I've actually reached out. I intend to work at a polling place on Election Day. My wife has also volunteered at a different location because we do appreciate that many of the poll workers either are concerned about their own safety or have some kind of an issue that might prevent them from being at the polls. So I would certainly say that I feel safe being there because of the safeguards that are being put in place by local governments and the Wisconsin Elections Commission. And for anybody who's watching, if you're bored at home and you are sick of watching Netflix, volunteer to go and help at the polls. We need people to step up. This election's going to happen. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to have it on April 7th, and that's why I'm going to be there, and I hope anybody who's watching would also do their civic duty and help if they're able to.
Yeah, I keep reminding people that there's kind of a logistics item that continues to march forward, and that's school lunches throughout the state. There's thousands and thousands of school lunches that are being prepared every evening to be dispensed the next day. And I got to give kudos to the administrators and the principals and the teachers and the support staff that are making that happen. I think it's a good example how, in a very formal way, that if you want to try and get something done, you can get it done. And this is happening every day in Wisconsin right now. And there's obviously contact with individuals as they come and pick up those lunches. So when I've had a couple of conversations with clerks, I know that they've reached out to the districts to see exactly how they're doing it. And it's a good example, I think. And if you want to make this work, you can make it work. And hopefully that's the way that'll go on that one day on April 7th. So, Scott Bauer, Associated Press.
Yeah, hey, can you hear me?
We can. Yep.
Okay. Just curious on the election again. You know, Milwaukee says they're going to go from over 100 polling sites down to a dozen or 10. Are you both comfortable that given the limitation on actual polling sites that the election can go off in a fair way?
Yeah, I know that in our everyday 11:30 conference calls with the administration that they have continued to promise to be able to find ways of getting people to to man those polls. So whether that's the current number of polling places or if it's reduced, it sounds like the administration has been working on that. But again, I think some of the clerks have been very resourceful. Some of the mayors and village presidents in that have figured out ways to get this done. So even though it looks like there will be a reduction in the amount of polling places that are going to be there, we're in excess, as of this morning, of 1 million ballots being distributed statewide, and about 380,000 of them have already been turned in, and individuals have voted. So the word is definitely getting out there. If you want to vote in this election, that you have had ample opportunity to do that, and hopefully that'll reduce the number of people that show up on the 7th of April to cast their ballot in person. But I think we are up to this task, and it sounds like it's going to get done.
I agree.
Anthony DeBruzzi from Spectrum News.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your time today. Building off of this election stuff, in the DOJ amicus brief regarding the election lawsuits, it says Governor Tony Evers will use the National Guard to assist as poll workers. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I think it's a creative way to help solve the problem. I'm hoping that all across the state, we have public workers who have not necessarily been able to help, just like we have volunteers and people in the private sector who haven't been able to work either. For folks who could step up, of course, you get paid to work at the polls. So if you are laid off, this is a creative way for you to go and help your community and also do that. So if the National Guard does not have other duties, making sure that our communities are safe, I certainly support the idea of using them in limited circumstances where potentially there's no poll workers or there's a real short supply. So whatever we can do to get people there, be they in the military or hopefully an awful lot of people who are watching this, just take the time to call your local clerk and volunteer your time. In my community, they have 2 shifts. They have a morning and an evening, so people can do it for part of the day. They can do it the entire day. You get paid to be there, and you certainly are going to help make sure this election goes smoothly. So whatever we have to do to make that happen, I certainly would appreciate people volunteering.
Gwen from the Wheeler Report.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Gwen, go ahead.
Going back to the question about the timeline for a possible session, I assume that you're going to call session in through an extraordinary. Can you just walk through that process? You'll call an extraordinary session, you'll introduce a bill. How do you anticipate holding a public hearing or an exec and doing a floor session?
So Majority Leader Steinecke and Speaker Pro Tem Tyler August have kind of led our efforts in our chamber to see how we can have a session that's safe for everyone. So I anticipate that we are going to use extraordinary session because that allows us to have a more expedited process. It does not require a public hearing. It doesn't require a Rules Committee meeting. So that's why our goal would be to have one that's negotiated, where we can make sure we explain it to the public so we're not doing it in a way that has anything that is not transparent, but also ensures it so that it can be safe, knowing that, as an example, the Capitol is closed. So it's hard to have a public hearing when we have the Capitol closed to the public. So that's how we want to make sure we are very transparent in explaining it. And I think that the public will have every ample opportunity to see what's in it, because we are not going to try to rush this thing through, because that's the last idea that we would want, is for anyone to feel like we are not living up to our constitutional duty to make sure we do our job, but do it safely.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that we're proceeding as cautiously as we can. Gathering the entire legislature together is not an easy task, but feel like the give and take we've had with members, they are more than willing to come back and tackle the issues that are before us right now, and we just need to fine tune what that bill is going to look like. And as the speaker said, I think the timeline is going to kind of emerge on its own at this point. So very good. Molly Beck, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Molly, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can now. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks.
for this call. I was wondering if you could give us a better idea of what might be in the legislation you guys ultimately take up. Or can you give some examples of what you support or don't support in the governor's proposal?
Well, some of the big ones that jump out is we're trying to deal with unemployment. Obviously, there's going to be some items that deal with licensure, specific to healthcare workers. Probably the one that there's a little bit of lag time, which we're still trying to figure out, and still trying to get information. We've been talking to Director Lang at the Fiscal Bureau daily, and he is really scrambling and working hard. I think got his team working hard to develop kind of a list of how they think some of the federal money is going, if we have to take action on some of that stuff, or if it truly falls clearly in the governor's lap. So, there's a lot of high-profile items that I think people will be familiar with. And then after that, it drops down into a list of what I would consider more of, technical or administrative in nature. So that's what we're doing. We're working through that process right now.
On the one thing I do want to make sure people understand that I think, at least in our chamber, and I think in the Senate as well, there is broad support for the temporary suspension of the 1 week waiting period for unemployment. That would mean for anybody who files for unemployment probably in this calendar year, since they're not able to go out and look for work in some cases, and they're not able to necessarily do some of the work searches for a while. We want to make sure people have access to those benefits. So I think that's one of those things that there probably is general agreement on, just some of the details that Senator Fitzgerald said as to how it works. But for anybody who's unemployed and is worrying about making sure that they can still pay their rent, pay their mortgage, we want to make sure they have access to those benefits. And I feel pretty confident that by the time we adjourn the session, that's an example of something that I think will become law.
Very good. Patrick Marley, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Hey, thanks for the call here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep, we can. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to try to sneak in two here first. I just wanted to get a yes or no answer to follow up from what the speaker just said. Would that 1 week unemployment waiting period be retroactive, and if so, till when? And then I also wanted to ask you about what the judge might do today. It seems that he's signaling one possibility would be that you do have the election on Tuesday, but that people get to continue to cast absentee ballots for some period of time after that. Would you be comfortable with a solution like that?
I would say I certainly am comfortable with people who cast their ballots by Tuesday, having their ballots counted some time period after that, because, of course, knowing how many people are voting absentee, we have some certainty to say that if you send a ballot in and you mail it on Monday or Tuesday, you should know that that ballot has a decent chance to be counted at least through the end of the week. I think that's not an unreasonable place. I think if we allow people to keep casting ballots after they begin to hear about results on Tuesday, that would kind of upend the way we normally do our elections. There's got to be a finite time period. So I certainly hope that as he's looking to try to find something that's workable for everyone, saying that everybody gets to cast their ballot till the end of the election day and then they get to be counted for some time period after that, I don't think that's an unreasonable position. And if he is looking to try to figure a way to make it work and has to change what the election laws are, which, of course, in general, I don't support having a judge do, but I certainly think that's not unreasonable as we try to get every single person to vote, hopefully doing it safely, and then have their ballot be counted.
Sounds good. Patrick, just on the unemployment front, my bigger concern right now, and we've been asking the administration this every time we have our conference call, is to whether or not they have enough manpower to actually make sure that these claims are being responded to in a timely fashion. I think the 1 week thing, obviously it's been driven by the federal legislation, and with the amount of money that's coming down, it appears to have will take care of itself. Also means that there could be some kind of back pay on that front end. So it looks like as long as we take action as a legislature, that'll be fine. But I'm very concerned seeing some of the numbers in other states and the projections for unemployment claims in the second quarter. That they're going to fall behind and not be able to deal with this issue. We're being told they've got a handle on it, but I'm very concerned on that front.
It is something that I worry about, because I heard a news report just today driving to the Capitol where a gentleman was on the phone saying that he literally tried dialing for 10 hours and was not able to get through after being told applying online that you had to call someone to get an answer. So I think Senator Fitzgerald's right on target with this, that they have the ability to hire people. They have the ability, especially with the unemployment system, to hire more workers to bring them in. So I think we would both implore the governor that as much as you are able, bring in people, get questions answered, because there's a lot of folks who are depending on it.
Absolutely. Brianna Riley, Cap Times.
Thanks so much for holding this. Would you support Governor Evers' joint resolution to indefinitely extend the public health emergency until it's later revoked, and why or why not?
I do not. I think that we know that the end date is May 10th, and we know after that local municipalities have the ability to keep the health order in place. So I do not want to say today that we're going to give an indefinite timeline. If the crisis continues, we're always open to looking and saying, how could we work with him to make sure that a lot of the orders stay in place. But the idea that it's going to go on forever is one that I think many of us would prefer to have a process that's more collaborative as opposed to one where we've gone through the current process. So if it's needed, I'll certainly take a look at it, as will our caucus, but I don't think we want to assume today that we're just going to allow it to go on indefinitely.
Yeah, I'm in the same position. As a matter of fact, of many of the issues that are out there, this is one that members continue to bring up. Everybody's looking for certainty, and I get that. But at this point, I think it's way too early to kind of make that call. But gosh, I'm hopeful that we can certainly pivot at maybe even before that point to be able to get businesses out there and back on track. I'm hopeful that that'll happen. But certainly that's something that we're going to have to really scrutinize is when that May date comes out. So. Amy DuPont from Fox 6.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. This is Angelica filling in for Amy DuPont. We've been speaking with a lot of small businesses who are struggling. They're being as creative as they can during these trying times just to stay afloat. But again, it's the first of the month, and rent was due for a lot of their shops. What is your message to those small business owners that are struggling? What's the message on what's being done to help them?
I have called through, and I would say literally dozens, if not hundreds, of people who are affected by this, from the unemployed to the business owner. I had a good conversation yesterday with someone who owns a lot of commercial space. And I want to give credit to a lot of landlords who are working with their tenants and bankers who are trying to do it. I talked to a banker yesterday who said that they are actually extending the timeline and giving people a 3-month hiatus to not make payments, just adding it on at the end of the loan. I know landlords are doing the same thing, where they are forgiving rent as long as they have that same flexibility with their financial institution. So what I would say for every small business owner, the most important calls you're going to make in the next 24, 48 hours are touching base with not only your landlord, but your financial institutions, because it sounds like a great many people know we're in a problem, are giving flexibility and trying to work with people because they don't want to lose a business, they don't want to lose a tenant, and they certainly want to help people to succeed. So that's the advice that I would give, is to work with folks, because I think we all know we're in this together, and that the vast majority of stories that I've heard have people being incredibly reasonable because they understand the tough times we're in.
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate the idea that as much flexibility as they can create as landlords to give some of these businesses the opportunity to maybe continue to function in the short term, that's great. That's great stuff. I hope that's happening out there. It sounds like it is. But I also understand those people have mortgages too. So it's once again the ripple effect, or the compounding of the idea that the longer that these businesses are asked to operate in a very limited fashion, it's going to be difficult, I think, for some of them to come back. That's why the federal dollars and what's coming out of D.C. right now, if it can be targeted correctly to small businesses, really could have an effect on the entire situation. And that's really what I'm hopeful for, and hopeful that when these dollars do flow through to the governor, that they use them in a smart way and put them in the right place, and that the legislature has a heads up on just exactly what that process is going to look like. So, thank you. Emily Fannin, WKOW.
Hi, do you guys hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
All right.
I want to go back to the 1 week waiting period. It was asked, but I don't think it was answered. Would it be retroactive, and if so, until when? And Speaker, you said there's broad support for it, but Senator, do you support it fully?
Yeah, I think the way it's been described is if somebody had applied prior to the federal dollars being cut loose, which looks like it's going to arrive somewhere about the 24th of April, that, those dollars are going to start to make their way out. So if somebody had already applied, had been put on the unemployment insurance rolls, that somehow they would get, that money would be kicked back to them at a later date. So that's my understanding of how they're trying to put this together. I don't have any confirmation on that, but I think that's the way it's going to work. So absolutely, I would support that. I think that's going to be critical to have success. I think on the front end, everybody understands that people need help right now that lost their job. I mean, the debate can go on and on and on for months as to how long those benefits should be in place or how long they should exist or what we can afford, quite honestly. I mean, we know that there's a finite amount of money that's currently in that pot. Thank goodness it's $1.9 billion at the state level. But I think that discussion is something we need to have as we deal with coronavirus.
And that's one of the questions that I think Senator Fitzgerald's right. My understanding is we have the ability to go back somewhat. I don't know if we go all the way back to when Governor Evers ordered the stay at home or if we're only able to go back to when the federal bill passed. That's one of the questions we have to get answered as well. But I certainly would support whatever is allowed under federal law.
Laurel White from Wisconsin Public Radio.
Hey there, can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. So just to kind of expound on that a little bit, for the 1 week waiting period, is there any chance that you guys could come in and act on that sooner while you're kind of waiting for that LFB analysis of the CARES Act? You say that there's support for lifting the waiting period. I know the governor has pushed you to act on that quickly. Is there any possibility that you could meet an extraordinary session more than once?
I certainly think it's possible, but I think our goal is to come in and do a single day, a single piece of legislation that covers everything. And then if we need to come back weeks or months from now, of course, we're always open to that if there's a real need, but we're trying to be comprehensive, knowing how challenging it is to get people together and do it safely. That's why I think we're trying to do it a single time and have an agreement that's broad and bipartisan. So, I think that's one of the best things about our Fiscal Bureau. They are really on top of this, and I think that we will probably have their analysis sometime in the next 24, 48 hours, so that'll allow us to get the final documents we need to put the package together and hopefully have an answer shortly thereafter.
Jessica from Up North News.
Hi, thanks for having this call today. I just wanted to follow up real quick on what Speaker Vos just said. You said the LSB analysis, that the crew is real on top of it. They should have something to you, you're hoping, within 24 to 48 hours. Is it your expectation then that you should be able to have something for lawmakers to vote on within early to mid to next week?
It's too early for us to say that, but my hope would be that we can do this as quickly as possible. So we really are trying our very best to do a package that's going to be broad and bipartisan, and that's why taking time to work out those details is not as simple as just the two of us sitting in a room and kind of putting it before the body. We want to really have smart people come together, give us the things that they need, and we do it comprehensively. So, of course, we do not want to delay. We want to get this done as quickly as we are able to do it, but we also want to be smart. Because I'm looking at what other states around the country have done where they rushed out and they spent a bunch of state money and they now are not certain how much of that's going to get reimbursed from the federal government under the CARES Act. So I think we have wanted to be as smart as we can, and that's what I think we've continued to do, but we're not trying to stall or delay. Our goal is the opposite. Let's get this done as quickly as we can, but let's be smart about it.
I am, as the press corps is well aware, it appears that the Capitol has a fire drill scheduled right now. So why don't we take a time out and then we'll rejoin as soon as that's over with. So. Okay. We'll give this a shot then. Charles Benson, TMJ4.
It is on.
Charles, are you there, Charles? Yeah. Charles Benson, are you there?
Might have to do *6.
Hey guys, sorry about that.
Okay, we got you. Go ahead.
So given where we are on the number of unemployment claims, do you know when we would run out of money? How concerned are you that there will be enough money there for everyone?
That's another thing we have asked the Fiscal Bureau to do an analysis of, but they can't do it until they complete the analysis of how the federal money interacts. So that's another thing that's really important. As Senator Fitzgerald said, we have $1.9 billion in our unemployment insurance reserve account, which is significantly more than we had at the beginning of the last recession. So we know we have it for the foreseeable future, and God willing that we bounce out of this quickly. Hopefully we'll be in good shape, but that's why it's important for us to know when businesses can reopen, have an idea of how we ramp back up, and that we do everything we can to try to get our economy flowing again so we don't get that fund upside down and then have a problem with it.
Yeah, I'd just say I think early on, a couple weeks ago, we were doing the rough math to try and figure it out, but I've actually given up on that because it's become obviously much more complicated. And with the federal legislation passing, the way that interacts, I mean, it's going to take a while, and it's probably going to be something that's going to have to be monitored on a daily basis. You know, yesterday, like I said earlier, I think 443 million more claims nationwide, and we're not sure exactly how that trickles down to Wisconsin. So there's so many kind of new factors in play. I would be really hesitant to try and even throw a number out there, but it's something we're going to have to monitor on a daily basis. So, Bill Osmulski from McIver, welcome to McIver Institute. We're always willing to have you join us at our press conferences.
And the liberal side, too.
That's right. Jason Stein could even participate if he wants. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'd just like to ask, so on one hand, at every press conference, we see Governor Evers and Secretary-designee Andrea Palm struggle to answer very basic questions about this situation, like how many people are in the hospital, how many supplies we have on hand, how many supplies we're going to need in the future, what's going to be our ICU bed needs. And then on the other hand, we're seeing requests for billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in additional spending. So I'm just wondering what conversations you've had about this apparent lack of data driving such big decisions.
Yeah, it's a big concern, and we, I think, continue to put pressure on the administration to deliver that. I'll give a little bit of credit on that front. It seems that they are trying to pull something together, but have not been successful. I think every day that they work on this, trying to develop data that supports kind of the moves that they have been making is something that a lot of people are asking questions about, including the medical community that is trying to gauge exactly where this state will be in the crisis mode that we're operating out of right now. So, but it is something that continues to come up on our daily conference call. And it is a cause of frustration, though. I have a number of my senators right now that are reaching out directly to the Secretary's office, just asking exactly for that. They would like more data and more proof that the moves that are being made by the administration are being driven by data and not just by moving dollars around or decisions that may be influenced by one department or another. Maybe having a specific need, but is not backed up by the numbers.
Well, and I would say this too, Bill, that there's probably nothing that frustrates me more than having decisions that are made where people can't understand the rationale behind them. And this is a prime example where every single elected official that I know is, except for perhaps the governor, but the rest of us are making decisions by anecdote. You talk to a nurse. I talked to a nurse who works at Freighter who told me that the obstetrics ward is full and a lot of people have COVID virus. Well, it's hard to get independent verification of that and to know, to be able to tell the public, is that true or not? How are we able to deal with it? So my hope is that, and just like Senator Fitzgerald, I know it's a challenge, but we need to have this data. So if every single hospital should not only be giving the data to the people that they talk to, they need to give it to the public. We need to know how many people are hospitalized, how many people have recovered, how many people have tested positive. And some of those data points are put out there, but the rest of them need to too. It's not like we're in this alone. You can look around the country and you see the data that's being put out by Minnesota or Texas or other parts of the country. It is much more comprehensive than the data that we are getting out of our state government. So I know we're all in a very challenging time, but if other governments around the country can step up and do it, I know Wisconsin can too. So hopefully in the very near future we have that data so the public can make their own decisions and not just rely on anecdotes and rumor.
Amy Reed from Channel 3.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering, you bring up, or we've been talking about the 1 week waiting period, but there's a whole other host of issues you've also touched on with unemployment in our state. I wanted to know how you guys see the role of the legislature in helping to fix that.
Well, I would say, WEDC is going to play a role in that. It's something that the administration has continued to talk about, whether or not those programs will have success or whether or not they can be customized at this point to assist small businesses. I think that absolutely is an agency that's nimble and was designed to be that way going back many years. And I think it can be a big part of the success when it comes to lowering very quickly or reducing the amount of people that are unemployed and hopefully getting a lot of these businesses back up on their feet.
I also think that the Trump administration, we just had on Saturday the signing of the largest bill that has ever passed the Congress, and an investment especially in helping small business and those who are unemployed. So it sounds like from the press reports that I have heard that Secretary Mnuchin expects to have guidance out by the end of the week, hopefully no later than next Monday, so small businesses get a better idea of who qualifies, how they apply, what the process is. And I think that's got to happen first because, again, the state of Wisconsin doesn't have the ability to print money or to borrow it for operations like the federal government does. So we need to have our federal partners take the lead on some of these things, and that's why we have to see how businesses qualify. And then if there are holes, we have to look and see, as Senator Fitzgerald said, through groups like WEDC or our local chambers of commerce, our local community development organizations. All of those are going to play a role too. But again, the quicker we are able to get businesses back open, the safer that our communities can be, and the long-term impact of this recession that probably is going to happen, hopefully can be quick and get us back to semi-normal.
Okay, Sean Kirby from Wisconsin Health News. Sean, you there? Sean? Okay, maybe we'll come back to Sean. Riley Vetterkine, Wisconsin State Journal.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay. My first question, I'm just wondering, if federal dollars are exhausted, what is the ceiling on the amount of state dollars you'd be willing to spend to aid in this crisis? And then are you willing to allow Governor Evers to move jobs from one agency to another?
Well, we're becoming very, very concerned about general purpose revenue as we're kind of flying blind. We don't have a new set of numbers, and we won't have them for some time. But obviously, with the revenue streams being shut down or changed dramatically in a very short period of time, it's something I think that I'm very aware of. The Speaker and I have been talking about GPR, and then also members are very concerned about what position that puts us in if suddenly federal dollars would not be used correctly, which is always and I'm not. That's not a criticism of the administration. It's just again they're going to have to act quickly and I'm hopeful that some of those funds make their way to the right place. But no, GPR is a big concern, and it's something that we're going to have to watch very closely.
And I would just add that, the budget that we passed in June gave a lot of significant increases for very important programs. We invested more money in schools. We invested more money in a whole lot of programs. And unfortunately, that was built on revenue estimates that were based on a pretty great economy. Well, now we know the economy, under the best case scenario, is going to have a really bad second quarter and come back in the third and fourth and get back to normal. But that's going to mean a reduction in revenue. So we have to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves what money has to be spent because we have to deal with the virus, and what money might have to wait until times return to be better. So those are really hard questions that the entire legislature is going to have to deal with. But I think it's also important for us to be upfront and honest in saying that, a lot of the things that we had hoped to be able to do might not be able to come to fruition because we are all dealing with a crisis that none of us saw coming.
Michael Spalding from WTMJ. Michael, are you there? TMJ? Okay, how about Melanie Conklin, Wisconsin Examiner?
Good morning. I have to say I very much appreciate you having me on the call.
You bet.
No problem. And Jason Stein welcoming him too. My question, what do you predict will be the day after the election headlines? Not so much in terms of winners and losers, but more in terms of the election process, democracy type of thing.
That's a good question. I guess I assume that to some extent the results aren't going to be known the day after the election because we're probably going to have an awful lot of absentee ballots being counted. We're going to have potentially courts that would impact the process as to where we are. So what I hope that the headline implies and shows to be a fact is that Wisconsinites care about the republic that we live in and the fact that they get to be participants in democracy. That no matter how bad the virus is, no matter if it was a world war or an economic recession, we still had elections because that is the fundamental building block of our entire society. So I'm looking forward to the pride that I'm going to feel knowing that hopefully over 1 million Wisconsinites did the right thing and cast their ballot either by mail or in person because the democracy has to continue.
I mean, I think I'm very hopeful that the lines will be diminished by the amount of early voting that is going on. So I'm very hopeful that the social distancing will be something that is able to be maintained, and that there aren't significant issues. Like I said earlier in the call, we know that this is happening in some governmental-run kind of environments like schools. So I would hope that there wouldn't be a big uproar the next day. Now, whether or not there'll be lawsuits, I'm sure there will be lawsuits eventually, the way things have been going here. But I'm hopeful that there's not much news about just exactly what happens on April 7th. So, Bob Haig, Wisconsin Radio Network.
Guys, on the legislative package, will there be a specific agriculture piece, and what are you hearing from your ag committees and your rural members about what they need?
Boy, I'll tell you, Bob, I have talked to farmers who are, it was tough times March 1st. There's no doubt that if you were in agriculture, especially dairy, but any kind of agriculture, you were in really challenging times, and it's not gotten any better. We know that food consumption for some products is way down. We know milk production. I've already seen, I think it was Foremost Farms saying they might have to dump milk. We're seeing milk futures are way below cost. I think we're looking at, I saw some futures at $13 per hundredweight. That's way below cost. I know they're talking about $2 a bushel corn. That also is a real big problem. So I think the agriculture sector has already been in trouble, and they have a lot more. Now, the best part of it, though, is I know that many of those same producers who've been in trouble qualify for a lot of the federal programs under the CARES Act. There's a whole provision in there helping to deal with agriculture. So again, this is not something that the state of Wisconsin can solve. It's not something we could solve before when times were good, when we were flush with cash. But certainly it's a challenge now, knowing how big the economic impact is on every sector. So again, I don't want to be a broken record, but it's really important that we have to know exactly what resources are available to every sector of our economy under the federal bill way before we make decisions to say let's invest in trying to do something for any part of our economy without the whole picture.
Yeah, the only thing, kind of anecdotal, early on, because obviously the school districts throughout the state weren't purchasing the milk, that there was kind of this, oh my gosh, we've got to react to this. Mm-hmm. And that's when you heard Foremost and some other dairies saying, there's no market all of a sudden for something that we had been relying on. I've talked to some dairy operations since then where it looks like there's an adjustment being made in the market so that those dairy products are available on the shelves in many of the retail establishments. So there might be some adjustments actually that could help. But again, it's all anecdotal. I don't have any analysis on that, but it kind of makes sense. So I'm just very, very hopeful that the federal dollars will help on that front, and that we don't shed a ton of dairy farms as a result of the downturn. It's also going to have an effect on leased land across the state, as some of these farms that have relied on that leased land suddenly are probably not able to make those payments. So there is absolutely a ripple effect going on out there right now, and it's another place that state agencies, if there can be some flexibilities put in place right now, that probably could be helpful overall. So, Gabriel Rusk from NBC 15. Gabriel, are you there? Gabriel Rusk, Channel 15. Okay, are you there? Are you there? Doesn't sound like it. J.R. Ross, Wis Politics.
Hi, gentlemen. A quick question for you guys. So explain how this package is going to work. So you guys rejected the governor's bill as too expensive. Are you expecting a second bill from him? Then will you have a counter? How is this process going to work? And what are you expecting from the governor next?
Well, I don't know that we rejected the governor's bill. I mean, I think once we saw what the contents were, there was a number of things that he had already taken off the plate by issuing the executive orders. And, the discussion about something like a sum sufficient, I think, is just natural for the legislature to have, seeing that it's part of our purview. So since then, though, I think, we started discussions yesterday to kind of work through a number of those items and see which ones we think there is support in both houses for. And like I said, we'll work with the minority leaders to craft that piece of legislation. Speaker, anything on that?
Right, exactly right.
Okay. Matt Kittle, Empower Wisconsin. Matt, are you there?
Okay, gentlemen, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, wonderful. Thank you for taking my call as a conservative reporter. I know that's not the courtesy extended everywhere, and it doesn't have to be thanks to a court ruling today, but perhaps I'm beside the point. I'm curious about the questions asked about the package, the bills that was sent over by the governor. We know that he is asking for a number of programs and initiatives, funding for a lot of things that would normally be non-starters for conservatives. Are you concerned that his first offer went so far, if you will, left in terms of what he wants to fund, what his priorities are?
So I guess from my perspective, Matt, look, I am a proud conservative. My ideology does not change based on whether or not there's a virus, right? So it's important for conservatives and voters across the state to know we are going to stick with principles, but we also have to deal with the reality and try to leave some of the issues that might be harder edged or things that are a little harder to find common ground and not focus on those and look for really things that we can get together on. I think there's broad consensus that we want to change that waiting period for at least the rest of the year to make sure people can access their federal benefits. I think we also know that for a lot of regulations that probably weren't necessary before, and I thought that as a conservative, but now we're really seeing them play out, that a lot of that was just bureaucracy without a real definite public health benefit. So I think there are all kinds of things where we look and say we're going to stand up for what we believe in. To just give a blank checkbook, frankly, if it was Scott Walker in there, I wouldn't have supported that either, because the legislature has an equally important constitutional duty to ensure that we have the power of the purse to guarantee that that money is not, spent unwisely. So I don't think anything that we are doing would frankly be a whole lot different, because we want to be smart. We want to find ways to make government more efficient and effective, and especially in times of a crisis, we want to guarantee that that happens. So I hope at the end of the day, we are going to be able to have that broad bipartisan package that focuses on things that need to get done, but nothing that as a conservative people would look and say, you've done something we don't support, or you've kind of forgotten what you ran on and what you stand for. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, the only thing I would add there is I'd like to pat ourselves on the back a little bit and say, thank God we waited to see what the federal package looked like. Right. Because if we would have started dishing out general purpose revenue early on, like we saw in some other states, in sizable chunks, that suddenly that money is used, and I'm not going to say it's squandered. It may have made its way into some significant programs that are probably helping, but we just can't afford it. And this is something I think we experienced the last time we had a big slew of federal dollars for shovel-ready projects. That suddenly it was like, well, where are the projects and where's the federal money? And we found ourselves kind of hamstrung. So I'm glad that we waited and pumped the brakes on the whole thing, and I'm super glad we're in a position right now where we can make some really good decisions about where we're going to go with this piece of legislation. So,
do we have any other Facebook? Okay. Facebook?
I think that's everybody on the list that we had of.
Hello.
Unless somebody's here that we had to skip over. So, yeah, is there anybody out there that we skipped over?
This is Tim at Wisconsin Health News. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hey, sorry about that. Sean had some difficulties with his phone, so thanks for taking the question. Just a quick question. So Governor Evers' administration, as you know, recently submitted a waiver to increase Medicaid flexibilities to respond to the pandemic, which would, among other things, make it easier for providers for more providers to treat patients during this crisis. Can you just confirm, is this something that won't be taken up until the full legislature meets? And if so, is there any concern that is too long to wait? CMS has termed these emergency waivers and has so far approved similar requests in nearly 40 states.
My understanding is they've actually changed some of the parameters, so they're doing almost automatic approvals for a lot of requests. So I think we'll be in the very near future, hopefully, once we find that consensus. I certainly am open to some of those, suspensions on a temporary basis, but let's remember a lot of the things that were put in there were things that were intending to help people be on the program for a short time and then get off and hopefully get into the private sector. Of course, as things have been more challenging, we want to make sure that the safety net programs are available to people who need them. So one of the things I think is going to get rid of any premium. So if you are on Badger Care, you will pay nothing to go to the doctor, the emergency room, no matter what your care is that's needed. I certainly understand why we would do that on a short-term basis, but we have to try to balance all that off. So yes, I assume that those waiver requests and the 1135 waiver will be part of the package that we put forward. But my understanding is we have time to do that and still qualify for all the additional benefits that would potentially be possible under the federal bill.
Yeah, I think we're on track to take action to be able to put ourselves in a good position to deal with that issue. So, anyone else that we missed or got we skipped over? Yep.
Okay, we have several people asking about why can't every registered voter receive a ballot by mail for Tuesday's election?
Sure, I can answer that. I mean, if you just think about the process that we have, let's assume that you have an apartment building full of people on the voter list. We don't take people off. We actually saw there were 260,000 names that should have been removed because they had shown to either moved or not be at that address. Those were left on the roll. So what some people would want to do is to basically mail a blank ballot to every single place. Some apartments or some houses might get 3, 4, 5 ballots to the same address. Under the way that many Democrats wanted, they didn't want to have a photo ID requirement. They didn't want to have a witness. It was just fill it out and send it back and get it counted. Well, how do we know that it's going to just one person? How do we ensure that they're actually legally allowed to vote in that district because they still reside there? So that's why, and in addition to that, the idea of trying to send out 3 million ballots over the course of 10 days or even 4 weeks. Washington State went to vote by mail, and it took them years to get the process actually put into place and do it in a way that guarantees the integrity of the election. So I think it was never really a serious proposal, and I think the way that we're doing it now, where you still have to have a photo ID, you still have to make sure you request a ballot and it's signed to one person, is the way that we can give people access to the ballot box, but also do it in a way that ensures that we're not going to have fraud, and something that none of us would hopefully support.
Yeah, this has probably been my biggest disappointment so far in working with the administration since this all happened. It was completely disingenuous for the governor to tape a video and post it as if this was reality, to float the idea just for the purposes of CYA that they were going to find enough outer envelopes, ballots themselves, inner envelopes with first-class postage, and mail it out to 3.3 million people in Wisconsin is completely made up and, like I said, disingenuous. And that happens sometimes, I guess, if you're feeling pressure from one of your own special interests or from the party themselves. But just really disappointing that they decided to go that way. So.
Nate Huff was wondering about how much money is in the state's rainy day fund.
$600 million is the number that we've been using, and I think that would be backed up by Fiscal Bureau. That's the number that we're all on right now.
And again, the goal would be, Wisconsin passes a budget for 2 years. We're not like the federal government where it's 1 year at a time. So we passed that budget roughly July 1st of 2019. We are in the process of going through it, and we're still in that first year of a 2-year budget. The entire thing is built on projections, and the Fiscal Bureau is almost always right on target. They have a fantastic track record, but now we see that income is going to be significantly down. We know that just by waiving the interest and penalties, which was the right decision to do for businesses and those who are not able to file their taxes, it's going to be about a $28 million hit, which for us is a lot of money. And that's just for a small part, for a small amount of time. As to what the revenue hit is going to be for the state of Wisconsin. So there's no doubt in my mind that we are going to have to at least potentially look at tapping that rainy day fund, but we've got to do things smartly now, knowing that we have a lot of time left in our budget, almost 18 months. We probably want to look at every program, double check and make sure if we can afford it, what kind of increases should be allowed, if any, and kind of move our way forward. So the rainy day fund would be our last effort to try to balance everything, but certainly we're going to have to tap into that. I can't imagine we wouldn't.
One more question?
Yes. Chuck Engel has 2 questions. Is protective gear being provided to poll workers, and will you work at the polls on Tuesday?
I think I said that. I am working at the polls on Tuesday. I'm going to hopefully work in the city of Burlington. That's in my district. My wife is working in the village of R-Rochester. They are advising if you want to wear protective gear, you are more than willing to do that. I am bringing hand sanitizer to my polling place to make sure I pass that out to everybody who is there. And I certainly know that we are working with the governor to get the materials necessary to be able to do that. But I will say this, I want to make sure that we prioritize getting all the protective gear to the people who need it every day, and that's going to the nurses and the doctors and people in a nursing home. So, I think we'll probably have cloth masks. Those are being made in my community by hand, and I know they're being handed out at some of the polling places. So certainly we want to make sure people are safe, but we want to also do it in a way that guarantees that the people who need it the absolute most have access to it first.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of municipalities where they have secured some plexiglass in which some of the poll workers can sit behind if they feel comfortable doing that. But I'm unaware of full-blown PPE, and I think hospitals are still trying to secure some of those things. So I don't see that would be part of the plan statewide at all. So thank you all very much for joining us, and we hope to be able to pull this together again very soon. Thank you
very much. Stay safe.
production
Okay,
of
good job.
WisconsinEye,
Thank you.
an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. WisconsinEye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civic broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.